12 and 12 pension cliff. What's the prospect of that in the House and the Senate with the overall reforms coming later this session?
Well, from my perspective, it's part of a more comprehensive look at pension. You know, I just was listening to Squawk Box this morning and heard former Governor Patterson of New Jersey talking about how the state pension systems are out of whack, and that people need to understand we need to make fundamental changes in order to ensure their long-term survival. And so to me, the 12-12 provision is more part of that comprehensive look at pensions and what can we do to make sure that we fulfill the promises we've made to the state workers and the public employees that have worked for us many years. We'll do that as part of comprehensive pension reform.
You know, let me also tell you that the police and fire pension fund is going bankrupt. I think they think that it's going to be bailed out by the taxpayers. I don't believe it'll happen. None of these pension funds are not going to get bailed out. We'd like to fix it, but we got to have them working with us on this. You know, it's really important that the police, and we want the fund to be solvent, but we need cooperation. We need them to help us and realize we're all in this together. But the 12 and 12 was a tool. Frankly, I tell you the truth, when local governments have been reluctant to ask for tools, and you know why some of them are reluctant? Because they're afraid they're going to lose their jobs if they work with us. That's why the Berlin Wall stood for 40 years. I don't get frustrated about things because I have an understanding of human nature and people's normal fear. We all have them. I mean, I'm afraid of heights. Don't tell anybody.
Can I ask the three of you about a question about the process? You're talking about the immense amount of policy change in this document. We have seen in the press a lot of people talking about constitutional lawsuits and things flying in and out of this. How do you feel about the fact that some Ohioans feel sort of like this was very much rushed and that they were blindsided by the immensity of everything that's been done? We're talking about 100-year policy changes all in a 2-3 month period.
Well, obviously that reflects the fact that you had a legislature that was willing to look at everything that the governor came out with and spend the time. It's just amazing some of the things in the press, if you don't mind my saying so. Most recently, for example, was the statement that the campaign to provide incentive for people to leave their money invested in Ohio had never been heard. It had never been heard. It was heard for 4 successive sessions. And in this session alone, it was heard 4 times in the Ways and Means Committee. I mean, a lot of these things have been heard before. People are timorous about advancing. The governor's made that very clear. One of the problems you always have is people don't want to change. That's very natural. On the other hand, nothing is in this budget that did not have reflection from members who have been around a while. Not as long as I have, but a while. And I think it's important for those who are looking at it, at what's happened, to talk to the members who are expert in those areas. Peter Beck had 5 hearings in the Ways and Means Committee on the question of investing in Ohio. That's the key. These other states that are going down the drain are discouraging investment. They're discouraging education toward jobs. And we have gone in a whole different direction. And albeit, yeah, a lot of things happened. But those young people worked very, very hard in those committees, and they've done a super job. We divided up things in the House. For example, in the area of Medicaid, we had 2 people who had worked on those issues before, Burke and Sears, and they went to work on that stuff starting in January, and obviously produced a product that I think, in conjunction with what Tom's people did, is outstanding. In addition, we had people who were working in the Ways and Means area on taxation reform, who had been doing those things for a number of years. CPAs to boot, they were CPAs. So it's really been one of those situations where it isn't how long it takes for something to come to fruition, it's how hard you work inside a legislative body to get those things heard, understood, and advanced.
And I would echo what the speaker said. I mean, my experience has been, this is my 10th budget, my 10th and final biennial budget, or 5th, biennial budget. My experience is the people who don't get what they wanted say the process was rushed. They didn't have a chance to make their point known. I can't even begin to tell you how many hearings Chairman Widener had in Finance Committee just on this bill alone. How many hearings were held in other committees throughout the course of the first 6 months of this legislative session on various components of this budget. So to my way of thinking, everybody who had an interest in an issue had an opportunity to come in and speak and make their point. They may not have prevailed, but they certainly were not excluded from the process.
You know, I went out of politics for 10 years, and coming back in and seeing the unbelievable partisanship has been breathtaking to me. You know, when I was in the Congress, I mean, the famous effort to kill the B-2 bomber I did with Ron Dellums, hardly a conservative African-American from Oakland, California, became one of my very close friends. What's happening in Ohio now is if you don't win, you sue or you make a public records request. Slow down the process. It's all in the pursuit of, selfish pursuit of power. Sentencing reform, the vote in the Senate, I think, was 30-3. That was something that people wanted for 25 years and no one would touch, because they were afraid they were going to be labeled soft on crime. Jobs Ohio, I think the vote in the Senate was pretty good. Bipartisan vote on a massive program to change the way we do economic development. Let me tell you another thing. A number of the Democrat members talked to Matt Carl, they talked to Bill Batchelder, they talked to Tom, and they talked to me. And they say, we'd like to vote for this thing, but our leadership just won't let us. And you know what I don't understand about that? Why don't any of them want to be leaders? When my party used to say to me, you need to vote this way, and I didn't feel that way, guess what? I offered my own budget against President Bush. I killed the B-2 against Dick Cheney with Ron Dellums and a host of other really good people. That's what leadership is. And a lot of these Democrats that are hiding in the shadows, afraid they're going to get a primary or being threatened, it's very disappointing, but I'm not giving up on them. I was fuming mad about this vote on the drilling on the public lands where there's almost a total partisan vote. Do you know the damage that these folks can do to job creation in the eastern part of this state? Do you know how many families' lives can be wrecked if these people are irresponsible and partisan? Wilson voted for it. Go ask him about what his colleagues told him. This partisanship has got to come to an end. We're going to tell you something. If we don't get it ended, well, we're going to win anyway. But they're fighting over. See, this state has been dying. And when people die, there gets to be an attitude of the last breath of air, drink in the coal mine. It's mine. We are changing that. The hospitals have changed it. The doctors have changed it. The universities have changed it. There's just some people that haven't gotten the message yet that there's a new way and a new day. And this business that there hasn't been hearings, discussion, that's just such bunk. But they ought to get with it. And you ought to stop taking all their propaganda and start asking them what their real purpose is. And all these lawsuits and everything else. Driving Mark Kwame out of the Department of Development is one of the most irresponsible things I've ever seen in my political career. Why'd they do that? Constitutional issue? I mean, I know press can tend to be a little cynical. Maybe you ought to think about that, why they did it. Just disrupting. And they're going to disrupt. We're not going to let them disrupt the agenda of letting Ohio recover. But I'm not giving up on them.
Mr. Speaker,
I'll charm them.